Hello everyone, I'm Olivia from DIA and we're going to be talking today about the ever favourite subject of managing risk. Since the introduction of the Standards Check in April 2014, this has been a very, very hot topic of debate. We could spend literally all day talking about different aspects and different situations and different contexts of managing risk and dealing with all your questions, and we actually do here at DI. We do lots of that in terms of helping people with upcoming standards checks and also reviewing how the standards check went. So post standards check and thinking some ADIs ring us up and talk about what could I've done differently or better or so. It's a good discovery exercise to have those conversations with you, with our members. So always get in touch with us, and we're all happy to help you with that. But what we're going to be doing today is covering three areas really. It's not going to be we can't cover obviously absolutely everything, but I can go through some of the more common aspects and some of the basics as well, just to refresh. That's always a good thing to do. So what we're going to cover: what do we mean by managing risk? What risks are we dealing with? And we must use a two-pronged attack. We'll explain more about that in a short while. So what do we mean by managing risk? So we are looking at these areas here. Prevention is better than cure, proactive versus reactive. So let's have a little look at those first of all. Obviously, when we're out in the car with a inexperienced driver, sometimes an experienced driver if they're a full license holder perhaps, or we're in a moving vehicle and we're dealing with other people on the road, loads of different types of road users. It's a very complex situation that ADIs are dealing with, and it's got lots of scope to go wrong. And one thing we say to ADIs is everyone's generally a bit, concerned to some degree about the risk management aspect. But we'll say, well, before the introduction of the standards check and where we had the check test, you still had to manage risk. It's always been there. It's just now it's got its own place on the marking form, the SC1 marking form for the standards check. And we know that big number down the bottom, 8 points or more, is a bit more relevant to us, because if we get 8 points or more in a risk management section, providing we do pretty well over the other sections as well, we're looking at a decent outcome, and we're looking towards a pass. However, if we got 7 points or less, that would be, even if we got fairly decent scoring on the other areas, but it probably wouldn't work that way because all of those lower competences are interlinked. But say you didn't do too badly on those other areas, then we are going to be looking at an overall fail for that particular standard check, because 8 points is the minimum that we need to achieve. So lots of people, lots of ADIs are aware of this. As I say, it doesn't hurt to go over the basics and clarify now and again as well. But so we need to think, well, how are we going to achieve that? Like I say, there are so many different contexts and so many different situations that arise when we're dealing with the pupil, the vehicle, other road users and everything else in between. So there are literally hundreds, probably thousands of scenarios that we could unpick, but we don't have that kind of time today. So let's have a little look at some of these areas. So prevention is better than cure, proactive versus reactive. So retrospective instruction, you may have heard of it. What we want to try and do is avoid it where we can, and avoid it at all costs really. We understand, understanding that, and I understand as an ADI that sometimes, and I've recently had this conversation with a member, or a few members actually, that sometimes if your pupils, let's be diplomatic and saying they're being a little bit challenging or resistant to seeing it from your point of view, we can get those situations sometimes with our pupils. So if we have that situation and you think an ADI might think, all right, well, I'm just going to let them go on with it, and they'll soon learn when they don't slow down in good time coming up to this T junction, and then I'll have to step in and use the dual controls, or take verbal action at the very least to get them to stop in time. So basing on something along those lines, we've got to think, well, all right, we need to get a point across, but are we doing that job properly by allowing that situation to happen? We've got to ask ourselves that question. We've got to consider us, them, and other people at all times, and we've got to manage that risk. If we let them happen to make, and we're making the point, we got to think about this. We are consciously allowing a risky situation to develop. We're letting them do it. This makes the whole thing far more risky for you, the pupil, and anyone else happen to be on the road around that time as well, including pedestrians, cyclists, and literally every road user. There is also no guarantee that the car is going to stop. There could be many reasons why it might not stop in time. It could lose grip. There could be, something on the road that prevents it. Weather conditions, something's gravel on the road, downhill, wet leaves. Who knows? So we're not dealing with risk correctly if we have this approach. And we've had quite a number of people saying, well, what if I did that? So what you need to do is think, right, okay, I need to get around this in a different way. We don't want to get ourselves into those situations. The other thing as well is, don't forget that if nothing happened, for example, the pupil did stop the car at the 11th hour at the junction, and they're being a bit challenging, a bit resistant, not seeing your point of view and not appreciating the level of risk that you can see, then we got to think, well, we're not actually doing our job and getting that point over to them properly here. And also what we're doing is making a rod for our own back. We are creating a much bigger risk situation and creating a monster by allowing that to happen. And if they say, okay, look at that, I got away with it, nothing happened, which is, we know that's the mindset of humans in so many situations. We're all human. We've all probably done that at some point, not necessarily driving, but other aspects of life. So, we've got to think about that as well. What we would be doing, and what an ADI would do this for and allow it to happen, is to obviously possibly to shock the people out of it and they go, oh my God, I didn't realise. But what I'm saying to you is there are other ways around it, and we don't want to be getting into those situations. You are not going to get on well on the standard check by doing that, you've got to be thinking, am I doing everything I can to address this? Have I exhausted all possibilities? No, there will be another way around it. It's up to us to find it. So don't let your pupil go hurtling towards that junction at X amount of speed, and just to experiment with them to see whether they will stop in time or not. Again, had that conversation a few times, and it's hoping that you can see that point of view. Talking about risk mitigation as well as management. So what we want to do is get ourselves in the position of not having to have a situation where, okay, there is risk building, or there is a certain degree of risk around. Well, there always will be, we know that, but bigger risk, the level of risk has increased or is increasing, and we have now got to try and fight a way out of this situation and manage it. Yes, of course, there will be situations all the time where we're dealing with that. Stuff is happening, new stuff, new information, new situations, new contexts are happening all the time as the car is on the move. Or even when you're stationary, stuff moves around the car, and we're having to kind of deal with it and get the pupils to deal with it. But what we want to do is be in that kind of luxury situation where we can mitigate the risk as much as we can before it even happens. If we can do that, then great. See what we can do to avoid that situation from in the first place, and then rather than trying to manage it when we find ourselves in that situation. Hoping that point's clear. And I appreciate, I've been an ADI for many, many years, knocking on 20, and I understand that you're not always able to mitigate, and you might be thinking, well, this isn't realistic, and I know that, and it's not, and I'm not saying it is. What I'm saying is, let's look at the risks, and it's part of our job as the trainer to be aware of those risks for that pupil, that day, that vehicle, that situation, that area, the lesson, all those variables and more, and just think, okay, this and this are flagged up in my head, in your head, as the trainer, and so we need to obviously get those points across to the learner. That's our job, to impart that knowledge, get them to see what we can see. It's not always, then we're not going to be able to do that with every single person, with everything that we know, because we've got years of experience behind us and they don't, and they've got to learn that. However, and you can't buy that experience, but what we can do is to share as much information as we can with them, and we can help them to unpick a situation even before it's happened, to look at it from various aspects to see how they would deal with it. What would happen if we did X today? How would that affect that person? How would it affect the cyclist? How would it affect that motorbike? How would it affect that pedestrian, that person walking their dog? How would it affect you as the driver? How would it affect your passengers? How would it affect me as your passenger? So how would the car behave? So there are many ways of looking at that, and for each one of those you can think, well, ask them another discussion perhaps. What are the risks involved to you, first of all, and then when I say you, the learner, this is you telling them what are the risks involved to you. What are the risks involved to any of your passengers in the vehicle? Today it's me because I'm your instructor. Or if you've got another person sat in the back, could be an examiner, could be standards check, it could be your driving examiner on their test, another examiner perhaps potentially supervising in the back. And when they pass their test as well, their passengers, plus everyone else on the road. So it's really getting them to think about this 360-degree approach for all of these things. And yeah, it takes time, and it's a real skill. What you've got to do is maybe kind of get a basic structure there and think, okay, like I've just been saying, you could say, okay, what we're going to do today, and then off of that we can offshoot all these different, how would it affect that road user, that person, me, you, how would it affect, and what are the risks to each one of those people, who is responsible for managing those, dealing with those risks, managing with those risks, helping to mitigate those risks, what would happen if we don't. So yeah, lots of things to consider. So what risks are we dealing with? Yeah, as it says there, we are dealing with pretty much everything. We have got a very big job as ADIs to do. We have got to be on the ball at all times. And even with those very experienced pupils that we've kind of, we trust, we feel comfortable with, they're approaching a test, and maybe they've failed the test and go for another one. You're good pupils, I'm talking about. Never let your guard down. I know you won't do, but never let it down. I'm not talking from bitter experience. I can honestly say I'm not, but I know some people that have, and it's come back to bite them. So what risks are we dealing with? We're still looking at that. So let's have a little look at some of these points. We are, as the ADI, we are dealing with risks inside of the car and outside of the car. We're observing the learner and other road users at all times. We are dealing with this ramp. I don't know if any one of you uses this. It's a useful little phrase that these things are around in industries, and we've got plenty of these things in our industry as well. Loads of stuff, loads of jargon that if we were speaking to somebody outside of our industry, they'd be like, "What the heck are you talking about?" So ramp. Not sure if you use it, but it stands for that, road ahead mirrors pupil. And it's a really useful little phrase for before the ADI, before you and I are going to give the driver. Now, when I say the driver, it can be the beginner, learner, partly trained learner, experienced test standard learner, newly qualified full licence holder, experienced full licence holder, anyone. this is your kind of little checklist, and I'm sure a lot of you will use it, do something similar, have a different version of it. It's fine. Great to hear some of your views. Let us know, and or anything else that you use. It's a great little checklist, so you can go through this kind of mental checklist in your head before you're given a direction or an instruction to your pupil. So you are going to look at the road. You are going to be looking at, for signs and markings, potholes, scarring on the road, different paint on the road, lots of things. You're also going to be looking ahead. Now, eyes on dipped beam, eyes on main beam or full beam. So you're going to now be, instead of looking more in like the immediate area in front of you, or nearly immediate area, the closer area to look for signs on these things, you're now going to be looking much further down the road into the far distance as well. Then you're going to be looking behind you. We're also not forgetting the sides, we know that, but we're going to now be looking behind to see what's going on around us. Is there somebody trying to get too close, trying to overtake? And then we're going to look at the pupil and then address the pupil. So it's just a way of doing a little check, a little check to make sure before we give a direction or instruction to a pupil, have we considered all around us first of all. So just thought I'd throw that in. It does sound like I'm stating the obvious, and I appreciate that. And lots of experienced trainers on here listening to this and thinking, yeah, I'll do that. Of course I'll do that. But, it's good to just share, even as I say, a few of the basics. There could be some people on here which are less experienced, newly qualified, even PDIs thinking of, I'm going to be doing my part 3 soon. So, that type of thing would help. Ensuring the learner is aware of risks, understands how to respond and the reasons why. So yeah, it's one thing us as the trainer knowing the risks, because we do, and we do this every day. We've got a bit of experience under our belts from training, from driving, from lots of things. So it's a great thing for us to know the risks, and yes, we will do. But another is to transfer that to the learner as well. We need to create those learning pathways and strategies for learners so they can understand in any given situation or context what happened, why did it happen, how did that happen, how did it get to that, who was affected by that, any consequences of that, of any actions by me, the driver, or any inactions on behalf of the driver equally. So that does apply to us as well as the trainer, but that's what we need to get them to understand, isn't it? We need to get them to understand and unpick a situation. So I know that the bulk of our work, yes, it's in car, it's dealing with things, it's, you might discuss it at the side of the road first, which yep, you would do. Then you would then go and do some, you might go down the route of doing a demonstration drive for all the people after, they say, yeah, that'd be good actually. And you can say, I could offer you a demonstration on this, and I can show you, and that's great. And then, or there are loads of other ways of dealing with that as well. But what we want them to do is to understand a situation, so whether it's something they're about to do or something that they have done, and to unpick that and to analyse it, review it, critique, whatever word you want to use, so they get a real full understanding of not just how I got the car from A to B, and how and that faster road I jumped from, I changed from second and I went straight to fourth because the road, yeah, great, okay, car control skills, absolutely. They're all those areas that we need to cover. But those of you who are familiar with things like the GDE matrix, Goals for Driver Education, stick it in Google, it'll bring it up. They are some of the lower areas, some of the lower competencies of getting the car from A to B, moving the car around, car control skills, that's great. But what we need to do is think bigger than that. We need to think, are we developing a thinking driver? Are we developing through our training active problem solvers, because that's what we need to do. We need them to not only deal with something there and then under our watchful eye, we need them to be able to repeat that formula again in another similar situation. So that's where on the, it's so important that we practice and we allow that time to practice. And again, under the teaching and learning strategies bit of the SC1 marking form, it talks about that. It's making sure that you go through it. The people can do it, they understand what they're doing, and okay, great. But then you now need to start unpicking it a bit and getting them to view it from different points of view. Hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense, and that way, if they can unpick it and see things from different perspectives, different road users' perspectives, different points of view, they understand the risks involved at this stage, this stage, this stage, then they've got a much more, they've got a much better opportunity to, and you're setting them up, you're enabling them to be able to cope better in the future. You're enabling them to learn to be safer drivers and to use those skills for similar situations. So you are coaching them. You are being that enabler for them to do that. You don't want them to continue to spoon feed them, because they need to break free from you after a certain point. And we know that, and that's all this transfer of skills and transfer of knowledge. But we do need to make sure that the learner understands fully what just happened or what is about to happen from all those different aspects we talked about. Only that way then that they can have that depth and that deeper understanding, deeper learning can take place, and they will use that in a better way going forward to some similar situations. Yep, we were just talking about that. So, and again, take the time to discuss with them why something went wrong, and equally why something went so well. We know that the DL25 is marked in, negatively marked, shall we say, because things are recorded, strokes are recorded on that, and marks recorded on that document when something doesn't go to plan, as a driving a serious or a dangerous fault. It doesn't include the positives, all the stuff. So, well, it kind of does, because they're all the blank bits on the form. But we need to get the people again to deepen their understanding. Do they know why it went wrong and why it went well? How did they feel when it went wrong? Again, take a few minutes, just take a little bit of time to allow them to explore that. Ask them some questions. When this was happening and you knew that it wasn't going so well and you knew, oh, blimey, then how are you feeling? They probably go, oh, I don't know, because it's quite a broad question. Make it a bit more specific. Break it down. How, was your heart rate up, or out of 5 or out of 10? How are you feeling in terms of nerves? Or, did you get sort of sweaty palms or something like that? Did you really start to feel like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this? Equally, when they've done something well and it's gone and it's good, how did they feel when it went that way as well? So that is, bring their feelings into it, because there will be tasks, there will be things that are going to happen, but there will always be those emotions, those consequential emotions that will come along, either at the same time or just afterwards. So you need to get them to explore that and to deal with their emotions as well. If something is got to them, it's a bit upsetting, they may not admit it straight away. It might come out sort of, that evening after their lesson, or the next day, or maybe the next time they see you. So, if something's happened, as you do, make a note and do reflect back and allow them that thinking space and time with you, so they can ask you any questions. I don't know if any of you are in touch with your pupils on email or anything like that. Or you could set up a little online chat with them or something like that. But it's just just an idea. But or they might be able to just give you a call and talk something over. I'm sure a lot of you do that. as well as discussing it on the lesson. Okay, so two-pronged attack. What do we mean by this? So yes, we know we need to manage risk at all times. We've talked about RAMP as just you know, a little tool that you could use. Maybe use it, maybe you don't. We know we need to watch around the vehicle at all times, and we know we need to watch the driver, the learner. When I say learner, yeah, it's easy to assume we mean like a provisional license holder, like the picture says. However, anyone on the receiving end of learning. So it could be occupational driving. You're taking a company driver out because they've flagged up as high risk, maybe just due to the sheer miles that they cover every week, month, year. They haven't actually done anything, nothing bad's happened, but you know, they're at high risk because they're on the road for a much longer time. So obviously watching who we're sat next to. So we have got to ensure the learner is dealing with that risk properly. In the national standards, those of you who know me know I'm going to get this in there somewhere. The national standards for driver and rider training. Type it into Google, or you can go onto the gov.uk website, and on the top right hand corner of that gov.uk website is a search box. Type in national standards for driver and rider training. I know so many of you are brilliant and you know this document upside down, back to front, inside out. Great, can't be happier. I know that there are still some question marks around this with certain trainers. Do I go a step further and say maybe there are some trainers that really not familiar with it, maybe not even heard of it? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I'm not going to rule anything out. There might be. This is so essential. You know, this is our blueprint to training. We need to know what this document entails for us, and I can do another chat on another day. We've done lots of courses on this, and you know, I'm planning on getting some more courses in our academy on this. So do take that time to look at this document. Yeah, it's quite a long amount of pages. There are about 30 odd pages in there. And when you look at it, it's not overly inviting, you know, aesthetically, but it's like it's set out like a standard educational document. And if you look at it, you look at the performance standards on the left, you must be able to make sure you are fit to teach and take suitable action if you're not. That's the first one. Take reasonable steps to make sure the learner is fit to start the session, and take suitable action if they're not fit. So what we've got to do from that is make sure we know and understand the importance of being fit to teach and able to manage the safety of the lesson effectively. And the signs that a learner's fitness to be trained may be impaired by, you know, things like alcohol, illegal or controlled substances, over-the-counter or prescription medicines. I mean, that's what the national standard says. But it also talks about, you know, the learner might be suffering from a physical or psychological condition that makes them unfit, including conditions that they might be unaware of or even trying to hide. Let's not overestimate the impact of real tiredness as well. Most people, you know, if they're tired beyond tired, they liken it to having, you know, a couple of alcoholic drinks. So, and it's so serious. So, things like that. There are some very basic elements on here, and I'm confident that if you read through those performance standards and knowledge and understanding requirements, there is a lot more than that. I've just read out the first couple, but if you, you know, I'm confident that you know. So many areas wouldn't really have too much of an issue with that because you're professionals, you keep on top of your game. But if you need to ask the question, you know, DI members, come and speak to us. We're happy to have that chat with you. That's what we're there for. Happy to, you know, you pick the phone up or drop us an email and say, hey, this bit on this document, you know, I don't really get it. I'm not really sure. Your call's always going to be confidential. So don't worry, there is no silly questions. We'd much rather you ask your perceived silly questions. They're not, and we're never going to say that. But, you know, we'd always want you to ask those questions. And, you know, being stuck on something is not always a terrible thing, but staying stuck because you're afraid to ask, that is an issue. So do make sure that you pick the phone up, get on your phone, drop us an email, and we'll help you discuss it. So just chucking that in there again. So national standards, yeah, very, very important. There are so many different aspects or parts to the national standards. There's ones for different, all types of road, all types of vehicle. There's one for cyclists, bikes, cars, different categories of vehicle. So as car drivers yourselves, also make sure you're familiar ones for the category B vehicles as well, and also that your pupils are aware of those as well. They need to be aware of this. So that's your CPD, your development, your learning, your finding out about this stuff needs to feed back in. You need to reinvest that back into your pupils. That's what your CPD, your professional CPD is about, to make you better so you can make them even better. So take that time and do this if you haven't done already. I'm gabbling on about standards, but in other aspects of that, it's things like the legalities, making sure you know what's included if you're going to be designing, well, everyone does design a learning program, but for individual, because everyone is different, we deliver a tailored approach, but it goes through some things that you need to know and understand. It talks about, the coaching and the facilitating group based. So if you're doing 2-to-1 or something like that, maybe you do the fleet work or instructor training. They've got an area in there for that as well. And also there's an area in here for the risk and the risk management and various parts of the risk management, because it's not all about, dealing with your learner and dealing with your standards check, excuse me. It's also, I'm just having a quick flick, risk of violence, managing the risk of violence in the learning environment is another aspect to it, and managing health and safety in the classroom environment. Now, obviously, sorry, a lot of you guys and girls are in car, on road, your trainers, your car is a classroom, it's a learning environment. So some of those things you think, okay, well, that's not a classroom, but I'm not teaching a classroom, but use that information in there, and a lot of it will translate over to you being in a car as well. So just bear that in mind. And again, any questions, just let us know. So again, next one, the learner needs to identify risk for each task or context and respond accordingly. So our job is to help them achieve this. So whatever it is, like I was saying earlier about, approach your injunction too fast. Don't let them just get away with it and do it, even if you've consciously made that decision because you're feel like you're banging your head against the wall because you can't get through to them. There will be another way, and there's got to be a safer way. Safety is paramount, and you know that. I know I'm preaching to the converted, but it really is. Make sure that is never. You never lose sight of that, and we need to get round and get creative. We're trainers. We need to find different ways and approaches of getting around things. So, and again, if you've got that situation right now and you're thinking, oh, blimey, this chimes with me, I've got that pupil or that pupil. Give us a call. Happy to have a chat with you about it as well. So again, our job is to get them to understand it in the safest way possible, in the quickest way possible as well, and the way that is the most meaning. So let's go back. You can do a mind map, or those of you, a lot of you will know what that is. Some of you think, what's the mind map? Spider diagram, draw a bit of circle in the middle and, draw legs off of it to, look at various aspects. You can do that with the approaching junctions. So approaching junctions too quick, that is your problem in the middle or situation that you want to cover. And then you can then have a discussion with the pupil and say, well, what do you think? What about that and that and that and that and that? Okay, now we're starting to get all these legs on this spider diagram now. And now we can use each one of the feet on the spider, each one of those legs to now say, okay, let's discuss that and let's talk about that from the terms of risk from that person, from you to me. And let's kind of, have that 360-degree approach and break it down to its components. Deepen that learning, deepen that understanding. So you can have mind maps, spider diagrams, get them to draw something. So many people, they like to doodle, they like to make notes. Sometimes people are just more, they like to discuss, talk things through, Q&A. Some people like to have a demonstration, they're more visual in that respect. Use things at your disposal. Google Street View to see a junction. You can, on your phone or on a tablet or on a laptop, you can get in the road and you can go along it and you can see road markings. Of course, you need to stress that this might be slightly out of date, that junction might have changed a bit, but find a junction that is the same, and then you can then review that in the safety of sat at the side of the road, or get them to review it at home between a lesson and ask them a question about it to have a think about between now and the next lesson. To keep them engaged in their learning, and not just because they feel that they need to be there, but actually so they can understand and feel that they're really, they're deepening that learning experience. We need to look at understanding why. They need to understand why they responded in a certain way. So again, our job is to get them to understand and review what they did, how and why they arrived at that decision. So coming up to this, there's a bus at a bus stop and you're going to drive past it on the high street. There's room to get past it because it's pulled over. There's not an overtaking or situation on this example, but you need to think, well, okay, the bus's indicators just come on just as you're about to go past, and so we need to. You would have seen this, and you would have started talking about it with your learner beforehand anyway, because you've looked down the road, you've looked at the road, you've looked ahead, you've used your ramp, you've looked behind, and now you're going to address the pupil. So you've seen this bus, and you're thinking, okay, it's a ticking time bomb, isn't it? It's going to move at some point. We don't know when. So we need to, get those skills over to our pupils to have they seen that risk? What's the biggest risk? Linking it to the hazard perception test, because this is linking the theory into the practical. Again, another important point on the standards check teaching and learning strategies. And we need to make sure that they understand not only identify the risk and seen it, but they need to think, okay, how am I going to approach this? What am I going to do? What is likely to happen? It's the same as you approaching a set of traffic lights, isn't it? We know a stale green light or a green light only gets worse. And we know that, they know that, but obviously they're trying to deal with the car and everything, and they've got more on their plate than we have. So we need to get them to, when we're dealing with this bus, we've seen it, we start asking them questions really early. And then maybe after that, we just have a quick review. You might pull over, or at the end of that lesson, or, not too long after, because obviously it loses its impact and its meaning. But to have that. So, what clues were there that bus was going to move away? And, how do we know that that bus is probably going to stay there? What are the dangers around the bus? Feet underneath it. Are there people still queuing to get on it? So many things like that, and different ways that we can get them to understand. So the next time you come up to that situation, you might go around the area and go down that particular high street again in the next 10 or 15 minutes and if you're lucky, have a bus doing the same thing, and get them to repeat that. So they're starting to kind of piece together this jigsaw of, okay, I need to watch for this, or watch for this, watch for this. And so, they're aware of those risks. And it's not just the bus and the immediate area, is it? It's people running for the bus. They'll come out of your blind spot area. They'll run across the front of your car because they don't want to be late home, so they want to get on that bus. So there's so many different aspects of that. We also want the learner to be able to, as I was saying, I'm kind of repeating myself now, but just to embed this point I'm making, they need to be able to apply that new knowledge and understanding to two similar situations in the future. That way, we know that the learning outcome has been achieved or almost achieved if they didn't quite get it right, and that's a way of us assessing that they know it. They've demonstrated competence. We are constantly, as trainers, switching from trainer mode to assessor mode, whether you know it or not. I don't know if you ever thought about it like that. Before we can go in there with the training approach, we need to understand what we're dealing with, and we need to understand through assessment, whether it's observation, watching them do something, talking about something. There's various different ways of us finding out that information, and then we do the training, and then obviously once they've done it, then we need to see how they do it again, how they perform the next 2 or 3, 4 times with that situation. So we're constantly monitoring and then getting in there with the training intervention appropriate to them, if as and when we need to. So you're switching backwards and forwards all the time, and you've got a complex job on your hands, and it's not always easy. It's not always straightforward, but you're practiced at doing it. With risk management, again, I've stressed this lots of times. I appreciate that on this chat, but you know, if you do have questions, drop us an email, support@driving.org. Go to our website, driving.org, and you can go on their help pages on there, which will get you through to there. Give us a call. But, you know, do bear these things in mind. Again, I've gone over a couple of situations, a couple of contexts today that you're likely to find yourselves in, a couple of more common things, you know, approaching junctions, buses moving away from bus stops. Yeah, okay, it's great. There are so many different ways of things and ways that we need to manage the risk. But again, it's that understanding, you know, at the beginning of a lesson, if it's pouring down with rain and you've got your pupil in the car, maybe they haven't driven in the rain yet, so that, you know, instead of just going, oh, your wipers are there, we might need the lights on, or, you know, might need the demister on, then it's getting them to explore it a little bit for themselves. You know, so what happens if this is the first time I've driven in the rain? Just say, okay, so, you know, what does the other people you've driven with, mum and dad, friends, family, what do they do when they get in the car? And again, all I know, it's always a dangerous one to ask, because they might not come back with exactly the answer that you would do, but they might say, yeah, okay, well, we need to put all the wipers on, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. That's great. We also need to consider X, Y, Z, and so the next time, obviously, that they're in that situation, then we can, you know, they can draw on that. It's your chance then to pull the information out of them and draw on that. So again, risk is everywhere. When you're doing your standards check, it is an integral part. It's like a thread all the way through. We need to deal with the risk at the beginning bit. You know, we need to talk about who's responsible for what. You know, we set a few ground rules, in other words. And I know that beginning bit is always it can be a bit of a sort of a sticking point, or, you know, ADRs, they know, but they just want to get a bit more clarification. So maybe we'll do another web chat on that at some point, just that beginning bit on a standards check, and what am I doing? What am I covering off? And then again, there is no, you know, perfect solution to that, because everyone's going to deal with things in a slightly different way. But understanding the tolerances and understanding the boundaries of what you can do, I think that's probably quite a useful discussion at some point. But again, if you need a bit more information on that now, right this minute, you can ask in a minute. We'll be around for the next few minutes on this chat. You know where we are. I've given you our information out a few times to contact us, but to go and do a bit of research yourself. Get the go onto Google and type in DVSA ADI1, and that information there is for, you know, driving instructor tests and standards checks and loads of other stuff on there. So that document there, if you click on the standards check bit, there's loads and loads of pages, lots of information, and it's guidance for examiners conducting those tests. But it gives you some ideas and it gives you some indications. So when you're looking at that national standards, when you're looking at that standards check marking form, the SC1, a green form, we've got lesson planning, and then you've got the teaching and lesson planning, risk management, and then the teaching and learning strategies. So under those three headings, there are a total combined 17 lower competencies. Each one of those competencies is kind of expanded on. It's the DVSA have given examples of what would show and demonstrate competence in those areas and what wouldn't. So you can go on that document and have a little look. We've included that in our grade A courses before, and people have found those bits very useful. So go on there and have a little read. Don't also forget your national standards, for goodness sake. Not only for the trainer, for you, but also the ones for the vehicle that you are driving, and also the vehicle that your pupil is driving, which is, you know, it's going to be the car. But look at those as well. Make your pupil aware. They need to think about so many different aspects of being a driver, and there is a syllabus on there as well, so you can use that within your training. So do that bit of research. You know where I am if you need any help, and happy to send links and point people in the right direction. But gov.uk for the national standards and the standard check information, and you can Google DVSA ADI1, and that will bring up that guidance for, you know, examiners carrying out those types of tests. you know, we have got other resources available. We've got a DIA essential guidebook for the national standards and standards check that's available through our shop. No, it won't break the bank, and it's an A5, nice glove box size little book, and we can, you know, we're happy to. We have quite a load of those in stock, so we can get one out to you soon as. We also have another book that we haven't written but we sell called Target 51. Another good book. It's more like a workbook type approach in some places, and some people find that one really helpful also. So, you know, there's quite a number of resources out there. Do come and speak to us if you're stuck. And at the moment, I'm going to start to wind down the session in terms of what I'm going to talk about. As I say, there's a few useful resources. I probably should have flashed this slide up a minute ago. I'm getting into the conversation now with myself, and my mouth's running away from me. But when you're watching this back, you can probably pause this screen, I imagine. But they're all the points on there that I've raised. So we're into the Q&A part now. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be around for the next 10 minutes or so, and then do feel free to ask your questions, and we'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can. And again, you know where we are. You've got our contact details. Should you need to get in touch with us afterwards, or if we can't answer your question at this moment. So thank you everyone, and I'll look forward to your questions.